other manufacturers, much like you guys. And we do so with an amazing mission to provide employment opportunities to those with disabilities. So we have 2 locations, one is in Peters and Lincoln County, currently serving about 200 adults with disabilities. And the dream is to maximize that and grow to the United States and be able to serve hundreds of companies as well. So, eventually,
oh, go ahead. Yes.
I have hundreds of adults with disabilities displaced due to company funds running out without innovation.
If anybody wants to get energized, by the way, talk to Jack about a tour of PCI. And you'll see the workforce you have ever seen in your life. As a former CEO, you want a laser-focused person, get somebody like that to work on your operations. All right, are we back?
Yeah.
Oh, we're back. Okay, so I got to be a little bit more.
I'll follow you.
You're going to follow. I got to stay a little bit more specific. I'm going to go through them a little rapidly because I'm going to talk also about the pandemic before. So the first step is business. So if you're going to be in supply chain management, obviously the first part of that word is supply, and we've got to think about our suppliers. In that. They're not the only part of the supply chain, by the way, but obviously that's a key component. Customers are part of the supply chain, and your employees' operations are part of your supply chain. We'll cover that as well. But visits to your own sites, visits to your suppliers, visits to your customers, really understanding what they want from is always or on the reverse side. Thinking what we're going to get to, the supply chain decisions we're going to get to, and the implementation we're going to get to. So if you want to just jot down those top 5, discovering baseline strategy map, supply chain and implementation, that's how we go about building and, of course, more importantly, implementing the supply chain strategy. All right, so I don't know if anybody, oh yeah, Jason's following me. We're back online for the, I don't know if anybody has been involved in really detailed strategic planning. And again, we've got some great firms in the region that do it, that help you broadly with strategic planning. But I like to start with the tools that have been around for a really long time. And one of them is from Michael Porter's book, Competitive Strategy. It's not an easy book to read. I think there's a reason that there's consultants in the world, is we read the books that you don't want to. But it's a tough read, but it's a really effective read. And his version of the world is threats, sort of substitutions, what can replace your service. I'll maybe just, because Andrew's here, what can replace the need for a barge, competitors, the other manufacturers, the customers that you have, and then without looking at that. So it's the 5 forces that affect your company, and the baseline is just to understand them. And really, by the way that I do it is I do each one with a SWOT. And the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, again, been around a long time. Every version of strategic planning is a version of this. I don't care actually what it looks like. If you underline and look at it, it is SWOT. Strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. So I always start with this. Actually, to be honest, I put the slide in the wrong order. I start with SWOT for the company, and then we build out the Porter's 5 forces where we do the SWOT for their competitors. What are their competitors' potential problems? What are the threat of new entrants? So what is the strengths and weaknesses of the entrance into the marketplace they have? How about suppliers? That's the one that I missed, by the way. What kind of power do suppliers have? I think for some of you, at least being on the supply chain side, I will often work on supply chain strategy because of excessive supplier power. So where you have suppliers that really hold most of the cards, the technology, the fact that they are sold out, that is an interesting situation for you to be in. And to me, it creates the need for a plan. So that's what we're here to talk about. So at least one of my students is here, and she absolutely recognizes this, because this is like, I drum this into anybody that's been through one of my classes that I'm told, you absolutely positively will hear about the SCORE model. And it's not designed to be for supply chain strategy, but I've adopted it. And you could look this up. I didn't invent this. This is the intellectual property of the Supply Chain Council. They're a group that put this together. It was actually a group of academics and companies that just came together and created a model for supply chain management and how it happens within your company. So this is a very important slide for me, and it's really how I teach supply chain, it's how I implement supply chain, plan, source, make, store, deliver, return. If you're taking a picture of it, the storage part is not in their model. I think they missed out on that one, and that's about warehousing and inventory management. So what I would ask you to do if you were with me building out your supply chain strategy is we would say, within your supply chain, what does planning look like? And by the way, not everybody is I know this is MML, but I would look at it as broadly, how do I call this? Midwest operations leaders. I would change it to MOL, because everybody has an operation. Retailers have operations, insurance companies have operations, financial institutions, banks, and go on. I mean, in retail, if anybody's in retail, there's a VP of Ops. So we can drop the manufacturing thing for a second and just say, everybody's got an operation. And the VP of Ops, by the way, she's a VP of Ops, she emailed me and said, well, I don't have a supply chain when I come to this presentation. And I said, well, I would differ on you and say, maybe you've got suppliers that you rely on. In fact, maybe more importantly, you've got resources that you're trying to utilize in order to serve your customers profitably. So I'm going to go through each one quickly. Again, you can take a quick photo of this. We can talk about it more after if you want, whatever you want to do. But the planning, again, I didn't create these definitions. Let me be clear. This is a around for about 30 years model for how to operate your supply chain. So planning, supply and demand, sourcing, kind of straightforward. That's the part most people think about in supply chain management. And that's finding, managing, and transacting with your supply source. Am I talking to this? Okay? If it's not clear, like if I do listen to something like that, some people tell me. Make, that's actually the manufacturing part, that's the transformation. So somehow you're either taking information or materials and turning it into something that you sell your customers. Storage. This is what I added to the model. So this is not in the model as you would go out and get it from the supply chain council and get the store model. And I really think they missed here because, by the way, where I end up focusing a lot of my time is warehousing and inventory management. Because even if you're a manufacturer, you have a warehouse. And if you're a distributor, you have a warehouse. And if you're a retailer, you have a warehouse. You get the idea? There's lots of warehouses. And everyone that's getting built now is getting filled up because of, anybody? Supply chain issues is one. I was actually thinking that's the right answer. There's another right answer. The other thing that we all take advantage of is we realize a lot more convenient. Yeah, e-commerce. So as soon as e-commerce, I don't think I've done this presentation, but in my mind I've got this presentation, how to thrive in Amazon's world. I might work on that one for a couple of years from that time. So, of course, by that time, who knows what Amazon's world looks like. So because of them, by the way, I know there's a few, and I know this one is kind of looking at him, real, like, tried and true lean practitioner. Remember, John, when James Womack, who's a guy who sort of brought me into America, didn't do anything, just an author. And when he said Amazon's model is going to fail because they have too much inventory. Yeah, that's what happened. All right, delivery is transportation and return. Of course, that's an important model that we think about. It could be end of life. It doesn't have to be returned back, but you got to have a plan about the return side of your business. So each one of these has to have some thought process. I'm going to show you just a couple of slides from the actual, and I call this the strategy map. It's got different names for how to do it, but I'm going to show you one picture from this one client that I'm using as my example here. And so the first one, again, I want to be cautious here because a lot of strategic planning firms are great friends of mine, and we pass business back and forth. So this would be their world. I would lean on them to work on something like a mission statement. But the operations within this particular company, this is their mission statement, and I love it. By the way, mission statements to me, and I have lots of people that I disagree on, but that's the maximum words. Is that like 10 words or less? It's something like 10 words or less. I have this maximum, if you get to 10, you gotta back off. So there's no double digits in my world. If anybody's built a scorecard with me, Suman, scorecard, no? You never get to 10. I will never allow 10 measures on a scorecard. I don't like more than 10 words roughly on a mission statement. So if anybody has a mission statement that's a page long, not in my book. This is much more powerful, right? Drive value while connecting members to healthcare solution. You can kind of get what this company does right there. You know, this is the delivery side of their business. It's not the sales side. It's not the marketing side, but it is the delivery side. So what you're looking at is level 1. Right here is level 1. This is plan, source, make, store, deliver, return for them. I know it's a little hard for you to correlate exactly those words with what you're seeing here, but some of them we left off, and some of them we kind of modified. So like build, develop solutions that work. What is that for them? And that's part of their operation. I'm going to focus on this one just for our discussion, which is build strategic partnerships, and that's the sourcing. So again, you're looking at the strategy. This is it, right here. Top line strategy for operating their supply chain, and in order to achieve that top mission statement of their operation, you're looking at it right now. This is a little hard to read. It's also a little hard to read on purpose. That I don't want to necessarily kind of just absolutely give away the strategy this company is using, and I would never show you the rest of it. I think, by the way, I do have a white paper on my website, so if you want to go to supplyvelocity.com, I'm almost positive I have this. So I'm not going to give you these slides. So if anybody wants these slides, you can't have them, but you can have the white paper version of it, which in some cases has more, in some cases has less. There's a couple of things I can't give you from this, but there's more actually on the white paper. So if you want to go to supplyvelocity.com, and you just supply chain strategy or strategic plan in the search part of it, I'm pretty sure it'll come up very quickly. So, to build strategic partnerships, you need to do all these things. And these didn't exist. I mean, look at this one, create win-win solutions. Now, the one thing I want to tell you is every one of these has another one of these. And so if we just said define strategic partner, there's a map for that tells this company exactly how they're going to do that. And so what we're looking at is a giant pyramid. Oops, sorry, Larry. So what we're looking at is a really big pyramid that starts at the top with that mission statement that we saw earlier and drives down into very specific things that this company does in order to achieve that purpose, achieve that mission. So hopefully useful. This doesn't take very long. We knock all this out in about a couple of days. All right. Now a completely different topic. So when you finish your strategy map, which again goes deep, the next thing that I'd like you to think about is real supply chain management. And so in all of the teaching that I've done, these are the 4 key things that you need to think about. Actually, I'm going to call them the 4 key decisions you make, or the 4 enablers of supply chain management. So now that you have your strategy laid out, now I'm going to ask you, are you considering economies of scale? So let's talk about what economies of scale is. It's simply saying you've got fixed costs, the more volume you drive at it, the more you allocate that fixed cost over more volume, you win. Okay? That may seem pretty straightforward, but it is one of the most important underlying concepts of supply chain management is economies of scale. So the bottom line is, the bigger you get, the better you're going to be from a cost allocation to fixed cost. Until you get over there to the right side and you start to have diseconomies of scale. So until things get so confusing that you're not actually taking advantage of your scale. And we've seen that over and over and over, right? So the era of the conglomerate, I think, officially just ended when GE is now, after having shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, is now splitting off into 3 businesses and focus on what they do. Okay? But for a time, we believed that the bigger GE got, the more money that automatically going to make because of the synergies between the businesses and the allocation of that overhead cost. Well, suddenly that overhead cost, actually it ended up getting fixed as they, and all of a sudden we've got just too many executives running around. So they split the company up. Okay? But you need to think about how you're going to take advantage of that. So how does that build into those decisions you're making? Again, you can't read this. I think this is on my white paper, but this is the whole spectrum of supplier management that you have. So different ways you can engage with your suppliers. So you have suppliers, you're going to have to choose if or how many go at the very bottom. The bottom is good of your partnership. In that case, that's equity partnerships. In other words, you're so important, I'm going to invest directly in your business. And how many are we going to keep transactional? I buy from you, don't visit me, I'm happy, like, give me a good price. Like, there's minimal effort involved in this. In fact, I don't even know what the price is, just, it's not that important to me. I buy my stuff from you, you deliver it, let's just call it that. And that's really good. It's really good to have that in your suppliers. It's good for you to move down towards the more engaged partnership that you might have with the supplier. So you need to pick, by the way, the customers, the suppliers, your customers and your suppliers, they probably want all of you to drive to the very bottom. You want to be really important to you. But you, as a supply chain professional, need to think, well, who do I want to be important to me? So for this company, they drove that. They drove a lot more volume. This ended up being this and this, or that, ended up being big things that they tried to drive to. So this particular company that we looked at had hundreds of suppliers, thousands of suppliers. And one of the actions was to consolidate that. And by the way, what's the risk of that? What's the risk of that? Oh, well, COVID.
Not getting what you need.
Not getting what you need, and now you've actually kind of let all those other ones go. And so you can go back to quarters by forces and say, did I just create a more powerful supply base that has control over me? So you've got to be aware of all this, but all things being equal for this company, it made sense to do that. All right, by the way, there would be no supply chain management without information technology. So the term supply chain management coincided almost exactly with ERP. So when I think it was SAP was the first company that really figured out how to put this together. When they came up with an enterprise resource planning software system, very soon after you saw supply chain management happen. And so when they allowed internal systems to communicate, now we can start to get serious because we've got the internal stuff that spent so much time and effort for us to do. I happen to know an information technology company that helps you with ERP. You can look to the front, and you can look to the back, and you can find an IT consultant that can help you with that. So without them, we as supply chain people aren't in business. By the way, there's still the operations, but there would be no supply chain. So go back. That term all originates from cloud computing, APIs, blockchain now, although I don't know if this is going to be the technology of the future, it always will be. I can't, a lot of people are working on kind of how blockchain works in supply chain, and nobody can quite figure it out because of the incentive problem, right? The either good or cockamamie thing about Bitcoin is you get incentive to participate in their blockchain or in their supply chain, but when you have these other supply chains, I'm not quite sure what the incentive is to participate in them. But somebody might figure it out. It won't be me. I don't quite get it yet. I do get cloud computing, and that is obviously a very powerful tool. All right. I think this is the last one of my key things that we need to think about, which is obviously the thing that we read. So supply chain risk. I think we all learned that this has to be part of your plan. I'm guessing for a lot of you it wasn't part of your plan. But there's predictive, well, there's preemptive, sorry. So preemptive is you are thinking of this ahead of time. And I'm not sure this works Because at the end of it, almost everything on the preemptive side is going to increase your cost. And when supply chains from 2019 backwards were working great, remember when they were working great, globalization, I mean, it was great. Supply chain was a race car. I've got a picture of that coming up. When that was working fantastic, there was no need for that. We just made it all in China, or we made it all where we wanted to make it. Maybe it was here in town, maybe it was in Pennsylvania, where Andrew is. A lot of experience there, a lot of capability. We didn't worry about dual sources. We didn't worry about spreading out our risk. It was just good. And then all of a sudden we found that there might be a need for it. The other thing is predictive. I get to work with some companies on this. This is very advanced analytics, where you're actually predicting that it might. So what happened in your supply chain? I think I can share this because we're working on a public paper. So Express Scripts has built a model where if certain things happen in the world, they have built a system that can trigger that back to certain systems. And they can contact the supplier and say, we think you're at risk. Share with us if you are. And then let's talk about the next thing, which is what is the mitigation that we do. I don't know about you, but I, unfortunately, despite a very vigorous exercise routine, have high blood pressure. And when COVID broke out, I don't know about you, toilet paper was actually on top of my to-do. It was my blood pressure medication. So everybody was running out of toilet paper. I was calling these restaurants and sending my next round ahead of time. And you know what? There was no need. I can't believe it. They managed that disruption. And they did it because of this. So they actually had a predictive and prescriptive model. So it's something for you to think about. My time is growing short. The next thing that you do in your strategic plan is those top levels. Remember that top level right there? The level 1 that I called it? You put them in a gap analysis. Again, this I just blatantly steal from my strategic planning friends. And you talk about what's important. This is their priority. And how we're doing on paper. So this is their whole plan. And that's how to build the supply chain strategy. Woo! Was I speed talking there? Shannon, was I talking faster than I did in class? That's how fast I talk in class? All right. So I'd like to talk about the disruption. This is the fun part for me. This is why a couple of news and radio stations contacted me to talk about. So, okay, that's all good, Mitch, but what happened during the disruption? I read this great article. I didn't think of this idea. I just read this great article that said, how come the internet didn't break? You think about that? We all went home. Massive increase in internet traffic, and it worked. I know it went out a time or two when you were working at home with bad times during your. I think it's still the case now. I don't have little ones. Anybody have little ones? Little ones running around? Can you find Lunchables? Can't buy Lunchables, but the internet works, which is more complicated. Pieces of cheese and meat. Internet. Anybody know what the internet's going to break? I've got a word. Growth. How come Tesla is delivering as fast and as hard as and how come you can't get a pickup truck if you want? And it's growth. And so the companies that had a growth mentality, the companies that had a growth strategy, the companies that built growth into their supply chain, they were able to handle this. The companies that did manage costs, well, they really suffered. And I'm going to jump ahead here. I'm coming back, I promise. But I know that Shannon, I'm not going to put her on the spot, remembers the bullet effect. And we teach that in every supply chain class we possibly can. But the bullwhip effect is a really important concept in supply chain management. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to my website, put that into that search, and you'll find a white paper on it. Again, this is not, I claim no intellectual property here. Other people figured it out. But it basically says that little ripples at the consumer end become big ripples at the furthest back that you go in the supply chain. Well, you know what? We didn't wait for consumer ripples. Some of you did what? as soon as the economy shut down and we were all sent home. What did you do? What did you call your suppliers told you to do? Who said that? Nick, louder. Stop shipping. Stop everything. We sent container ships back the other way. We told our suppliers, stop everything. We created, so when a reporter asked me, Mitch, how come the container problem occurred? I'm like, we told ships to turn around in the ocean and go back home. But you know what happened when they went to China? Did they want them? Containers they went. But a year ago, where are you going to get them? I know they're still expensive. We weren't talking about containers. That's because they got turned around, China didn't want them, and the ships had to go somewhere. And they went wherever they could dock. Whoever let them off the ship, that's where they went, and that was not the right place. So we created a massive bullwhip effect, and what happened? And I called it the wave. It's funny, that all seems like a bygone era, this whole you can't get containers, but we created this dip, and then what happened after? Bye. I want them now. Well, I don't even know where they are. They're off, they got loaded somewhere. I'm not even sure where they are. And so we created a massive bullwhip effect. And that's why last year, I know with the Ukraine tragedy going on, nobody remembers this, but last year, this was the story. But if you were a growth company, you didn't say stop buying. So why did the internet not break? Because it was growing at 25% compound annual growth rate, and nobody thought it would stop. If you were Tesla, you knew people were going to keep buying your product. Even when people stopped driving, they still sold a lot of cars. I don't know if anybody knows Jeremy Boyd, she's the president, this is a local company, and we were out to lunch. I think we can do that again. I guess we can do that again because we're all here. Remember that little short amount of time when we could go out to lunch with people? I think it was September. It was great. Anyway, I talked to Jeremy, he said this, he just said this. I'm like, Jeremy, what's stopping you from delivering to your customers? So you don't have enough people. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not materials? He's like, oh, no, I don't have that either. But if I don't have enough people, it doesn't really matter about the materials. If I get enough people, I'm not going to be able to keep them busy. So it was a double edged. I think this is now starting to work itself out. People are coming back to work. Are they coming back to work? People coming back to work? Some, generally. Oh, this was my race car thing. Again, the reporters asked me, well, how come we're having these supply chain problems? You guys are supposed to be professionals. You're supposed to work this all out. You're supposed to work much better. And it's because we were, I'm not trying to make all of us feel good, but you were. We were a race car. This economy was doing great. You know, the global financial crisis in 2008 happened, and we really did build at that time, build back better. We created much better supply chains. They were lean, they were cost efficient, they were fast, and we took 5 to 10% of the capacity out of them. We took out containers, we took out people. And when you have a fine-tuned engine, you take just a little bit of capacity out of it, does it win the race? I mean, just 5%. It wasn't that big a number. It's not like half the people quit. It was like 5 to 10% of the people quit everywhere. Or if you were in an autocratic society, this affected them too. You were told not to come to work. So one way or the other, you either got sick or you were told not to come to work. World over, it doesn't matter which economy or society you lived in. And that's what happened to supply chain. We were a race car. We took just a little bit of capacity. We took one of the cylinders out of the V12. And that changed everything. That's what happened. So, all right. My graphic artist told me about this thing on the left. Does anybody know about this? She put this on the slide, and we went over this. And I'm like, what is that? Does anybody know what that is? Oh, come on, somebody share. Want to tell us?
It was from a video or something.
Toilet paper, since you have so much toilet paper in your house, and you don't have anything better to do, toilet paper walls, and you show your dog jumping out over it, and then you go, my dog can jump higher than your dog. So there are thousands of videos of dogs jumping over toilet paper. I didn't want to include this because I'm like, what is this? But she convinced me some of you would know what this is, and it would be fun. And I'm not generally known as a funny guy, so this is my best attempt at humor. All right, I mean, this basically says to me, I kind of want to ask, how much toilet paper do you have in your house? Anybody want to talk about, like, 2019, I don't know if I can do it, like, maybe I keep 6 rolls, because it comes in like a 6-pack. I keep about 6 rolls in my house, or maybe a 12-pack, just because I went down to 6. I go ahead and get another one. During the pandemic, right after that, once we began, how much toilet paper did you have in your house? Yeah, well, you still have young kids, so I'm gonna give you that pass. But like massive amounts, 48, 64, I mean, that's how much toilet paper we had in my house for 3 people. We were actually calculating, you would appreciate this. I keep the pick on Shannon. Shannon, you know how to do this, where I was calculating weeks of supply, safety stock, and I was doing all the calculations of how much I should really have based on this. How much do you have now? Is it less? Michael, is it less? Yeah, so it's the same for some. I'm wondering what's going to happen. The Ukraine tragedy has made this conversation very different than what I thought it was going to be. Oh, I'm almost out of time. Shoot. I thought I was going to have I thought it was going to finish at 35. I'm going to move faster. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, people talk about, well, permanently, just in time is over and everybody's going to have more inventory. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I think you're going to go back, eventually you're going to go back to the way you were, because that's going to be cost competitive. So that was just my statement. So, last thing that you can do, if you really want to build resilience in your supply chain, there's methodologies for it, and it's called, is there anything you could exploit that's already there? The other thing, the companies that did the best in the supply chain are those that had a reverse network. So people that had a repair business, they actually turned that into the forward business. So everybody took their reverse network and they made it a forward network, and those companies succeeded. So there's great stories about companies that did that. So last thing, I didn't really leave time for questions. Anyway, you've got to have a plan. Remember that SCORE model? I hope that you sort of pay attention. Plan, source, make, store, deliver, return. That's the foundation. And if you're going to be lean, and I think you're going to go back to being lean, disruptions are going to affect you. So high-performing systems with small network problems create big problems. I don't think we're going to get around that. I have a colleague at UMSL, he is world-renowned in supply chain risk, and I argue with him all the time about this. We're going to go back to being lean. And if you're a growth company, which not everybody is, by the way, supply velocity is that we had 1 person a year. We're not a fast growth company. We did great last year, we're doing great this year. I thought in 2020, we're like, holy blank, we're going to be out of business in a couple of months. And we weren't out of business, we did good. So, but the companies that were really growing, no problem, they rode through. Hey, thank you. I didn't think I would need all this much time. Thanks to all hanging in there. I have like a 99.8% retention rate so far, so I'm not even taking chances. I'll finish it up. Thanks, everybody.